Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the February 10th meeting of the Blackstone Millville Regional School District School Committee. I welcome everyone and invite you to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We will start with our introduction of members. We have two people joining us via Zoom, so we'll start with them, and the one who's showing her face will start there first.
Sarah Larkin, Millville representative.
Erin Vinaco, Millville.
Amanda Gilmain, Millville. Tammy Lemieux, Blackstone.
Jane Reggio, Millville.
Tim Howell, Blackstone.
Carrie Gaudette, Blackstone.
Sarah Williams, Blackstone.
Patty Sacco.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Patty Sacco, Blackstone.
Thank you.
Matt Aaronworth, Assistant Superintendent.
Jason DeFalco, Superintendent.
Okay. What's going on?
Okay, so we have our new business teacher at the high school. We've been having mental health screenings for grade in 11th and 12th, and they've gone pretty good. 10th grade is next week, and 9th is after vacation. We have advisory tomorrow, which is team building exercises. And the senior basketball game for the girls was on Tuesday.
Great. We have the boys' games coming up. When's their senior game?
I'm not sure their senior game. I know they had one yesterday. I'll have to check on that.
Okay.
And the boys' hockey senior game Saturday.
Saturday. Okay.
Okay.
How many days till graduation?
70 something.
Really?
I only know because your daughter put up the till graduation in our science class.
Okay.
Someone's got to count down.
Somebody's got to count. There's always got to be a count. All right. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks. A quick one tonight.
It's the middle of the winter, not too much going on. Although I'm glad they're doing mental health meetings. That sounds great. Sounds like a great idea. Warrants. We've got some warrants in the minutes of the January 13th meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve consent agenda A with those two items.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Tammy, seconded by Amanda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the warrants in the minutes of the meeting from January 13th, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. At this time, we'll open up our meeting to public forum if anybody has anything they'd like to address to the school committee. Clearly not. All right. Well, thank you very much. All right, school committee items. We have a request for a class of, oh God, it's getting so close, 2022 field trip.
So we're going to Newport, so we feel really fortunate to have that. And then we'll be providing all the attendees with a $75 Visa gift card, which they can put towards, there's a ferry that they can take to a state park. When they get there, there's a tour and also a gift shop. And then that will also provide lunch for them. So you can see if they choose to participate in there, that's where the 75 would go towards. And then if they want to explore the island, we put together a little photo scavenger hunt for them, and those details are on the back. Just something fun to get them engaged in the Newport area, which we all know is beautiful. So I think they'll really enjoy it.
Yeah. Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I'm very excited that they're coming to my neck of the
I was
woods.
going to say.
Do the ride that I do every day.
If they walk across the bridge. No.
Yeah. Such a great area.
It is going to be awesome. I'm so excited for the students. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful, the places that you guys are taking the students and the things that they get to do, and
Yeah.
they're going to have an awesome day.
Yeah,
I'm
I think so
excited for
too. They deserve it.
them, For sure. Without question.
And some of these places are awesome places to visit.
Mm-hmm.
They really are.
Yeah, I'm excited, you know, if there's kids who haven't been to Newport, I'm excited for us to be able to provide this opportunity and, you know, in addition to all the wonderful places just going, you know, period, I think they'll really enjoy it.
And they can go to the beach, so they can go
Yep,
swimming if they
it's
want. Yeah.
walkable, absolutely. We'll get dropped off downtown, and it's, I think like a 20-minute walk, but
Yeah,
that's
it's not far at
doable.
all.
It's not far.
That's
no.
definitely doable.
The cliff walk's amazing.
Yeah.
and Fort Adams is so beautiful.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
just such a nice place to hang out. I think they're really going to have a great time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're
Great history.
excited.
Nice pick.
Anyone have any questions? Any concerns? I'll entertain a motion to approve the trip.
I so move.
Okay.
Second.
And seconded by, moved by Tim, seconded by Carrie. Any other discussion?
I just want to thank General Doors Corporation.
Yes, absolutely.
For giving the students this grant. I think as a parent of a 2020 and a 2021 graduates, sorry, it's really exciting to see this back on the docket. And thank you. I know as a teacher how much it takes to do these extra
Yeah.
things, so
Yeah.
I appreciate that as well. But thank you for bringing
Yeah.
this to us. It's very
Yeah.
exciting.
Thank you for highlighting that. Shout out to my co-advisor, Ms. Hunt, who really was the contact person for that. And as you know, we lost a year and a half of fundraising, so this is a
That's-
huge help.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
You
that's
and-
pretty awesome.
Ursula have done amazing work.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much for
Yeah.
all of that, Andrea. That's
We're
incredible.
excited for them.
So great.
Anyone else? Okay, there's a motion on the floor to approve the trip. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Enjoy your trip.
Awesome, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Have a good time.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll meet you for lunch.
Yeah, you should.
Okay, at this point, I will turn the meeting over to Dr. DeFalco.
Excellent. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see all of you. Tara and Erin, you as well. Although Erin, we can't really see
We
you,
can't see
but
Erin, but that's okay, we hear her.
Feel your presence. It's good to see everybody tonight. The first item under my report is an update on our COVID-19 situation. And I just want to briefly mention where things are, just to give a quick sense in terms of numbers. And of course, you can find everything on our COVID-19 dashboard on our webpage. There is a link right there on the main page of our webpage if you're interested in getting into the kind of the weeds of all the numbers. But just some very brief headlines of where we are. The Massachusetts current infection percent is about, oh, here comes Karen. Karen will do a far better job than I at explaining the numbers. Karen, you want to join us up front?
Just in time, Karen.
I was just going to give the numbers, but you probably have everything right there.
I'm sorry, I had the
No,
webinar
no
till
worries.
6,
You're
so.
good.
No problem. We're glad you're here.
Yep.
And they wait to give the code to the very end.
Don't
and-
worry about it. It's all good. Thanks for being here. We're just going to do a quick update on the numbers, and then we'll talk about masks.
All right. So in January, we ended up having 309 cases total. So far in February, we have 31 as of today, so we have dropped from an average of 10 a day to 3 a day. There are 18 active cases. With the at-home testing, as of today, we have 60% of the staff participating. Overall, 33% of the students. The school breakdown of that is 27% at the high school, 33% at the middle school, 38% at the complex, and 37% at Millville. The vaccine numbers really didn't change much. In Blackstone, 5 to 11 is still 16%. 12 to 15 is 51. 16 to 19 went up 1 percentage to 58. The town total is the same at 59. Millville, 5 to 11 went up 1 to 17. 12 to 15 stayed the same at at 43%. 16 to 19 stayed the same at 61%, and the town total is the same at 49. In the breakdown by schools, the high school went from 55 to 57. Middle school went from 42 to 46. Complex 13 to 25. And Millville from 6 to 15%. As far as the state percent positivity is now at 6.48 as of today's numbers. Blackstone is 13% and Millville is 13.19%. So we're still staying about double what the state is.
And the week prior, Karen, we were at 21%?
21 for Blackstone, 14 for Millville.
Okay.
And the state was at 10.
And so the Blackstone numbers have reduced quite a bit in a
Yeah.
week. Millville, it sounds like, is about the same, 13, 14%?
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, Karen, thank you for those numbers. As everyone is aware, yesterday, the governor and the commissioner had a joint press conference about not extending the mask mandate or mask requirement in schools beyond February 28th. After that, and we had a brief conference call with the commissioner just prior to the press conference. After the press conference, there was a Blackstone Valley superintendent meeting. We met about 12:30 to check in with one another in terms of what was happening locally with all of our systems. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Because just before that meeting, I had a phone call with the Blackstone Board of Health, and we had a discussion just in terms of local context, what's going on across the towns. And I know they're meeting on Tuesday to have some conversation about some of the adjustments that they're looking to make, I believe, in their own masking requirements. So I think there'll be more to come in terms of their formal vote next week. And I'm sure we'll get some direct feedback from them. But I get the sense in my early conversations that we'll be in direct alignment with what we are going to be recommending this evening. And before that recommendation, I would like to share that on the superintendent call that we had yesterday for the Blackstone Valley, there's 13 school systems in the Blackstone Valley, and 9 of us attended the meeting. So it was a really good turnout. And I will say that all of us are moving forward with the same recommendation. And so with that, what we are recommending is that we go pre-K through 12, mask optional. However, there are some additional requirements and recommendations. And so the requirements are that on the buses, masks must stay on for all riders. That's not a local decision, that's actually a federal decision. So we don't have any jurisdiction over that. Neither does the commissioner, DPH, the governor, nobody. That's a federal order. The other piece that's important to note that was not mentioned in the press conference yesterday, but on the follow-up call with the commissioner's office, it was discussed that in our medical offices and our nursing offices in our buildings, masks have to stay on. So if kids need to see the nurse, they have to keep a mask on because it is considered an actual medical facility. And so that was a detail that was shared with us after the press conference, but we want to make sure to share that. And so we do have some provisions in place for students that decide they don't want to wear a mask to school, but they don't feel well and have to go to the nurse's office. There'll be masks available there for them, so that we won't have to worry about that. The additional provisions that are underneath the masking requirements are not new. Those have been in place, so we need to keep those in place as far as masking for days 6 through 12 for positive individuals. Remember, when the isolation and quarantine language changed to days, I think it's 0 through 5, day 6 they can return, but they have to keep a mask on. Because remember, they're no longer required for a negative test to return. They just have to mask. So that is not a new piece. For days 6 through 10 for unvaccinated, non-school close contacts, and again, that's right from Department of Education and DPH. For days 1 through 10 for vaccinated non-school close contacts, with the exception of quarantine. And again, that's not new. That's from the Department of Education, DPH. And then symptomatic individuals until symptoms are fully resolved. And that piece is new. That was part of the Department of Education's webinar that followed the press conference yesterday. So that is, in those provisions, that's the only new.
Can you explain that? So if somebody has symptoms, but they don't test positive, they have to stay masked as long as they have those symptoms? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Until the symptoms fully resolve, they should be masked.
And then per the Department of Education and Department of Public Health, it's recommended, it's not required, but it's recommended that unvaccinated individuals keep their masks on, but it is not required, just a recommendation. And of course, those with medical issues or living with somebody with medical issues at home. And again, it's a recommendation, it's not a requirement. And so what I will be asking the school committee is for a motion and to support the new recommendations that we've brought before you this evening. I guess one other piece too, I just want to mention to anyone who might tune into this at home or is watching us live, it is going to be very important that the narrative and the language and discussion around masking changes quite significantly. And I want to explain what I mean by that. So there's been a lot of talk, particularly the past 24 hours, and then back in August, frankly, and in September, about not wanting to mask for a variety of different reasons. What I will say to everybody is that we will have students that either want to or have to mask. We will have staff that either want to or have to mask. I am asking our families to please be very respectful of this topic at home and how we talk about it, because we do not want the students or the staff who decide to either wear masks or have to because they have a family member at home with an immune deficiency issue. We do not want those students to feel targeted, to in any way, shape, or form feel any negativity from their peers as a result of that. And my concern is with some of the chatter that's been going on as of late that students listen, our kids listen. They watch us, they hear us, and they parrot us oftentimes. And I do not want our students coming to school and pushing back on their peers because for whatever reason they decide they want to keep a mask on or they have to keep a mask on. I think we are really going to need to ensure that we have a culture of respect working in every direction. So parents, I'm asking you to please make sure that you remain respectful when discussing this topic at home, because I do not want that to bleed into the schools and have our students who either have to or need to keep them on to feel badly for that.
Make a motion.
You may make a motion.
Oh, yes, I would like to make a motion to adopt
Second.
this.
Oh, wait. We gotta hear it first. We gotta hear it first.
To adopt the new protocols for masking.
Second.
Okay, I think I have to switch that up a bit because we don't
Okay.
actually have,
What do you want to do?
we.
You want me to
so-
just read it?
What?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I know we keep saying new protocols, but essentially it's the release of a mandate, so I know we,
But we're not releasing the mandate, they are.
right,
But we put ours in place first.
right. So we are rescinding our mask
Yes.
mandate.
But with these
But with-
guidance, with this
right.
guidance.
Yep.
Okay. I'll make a motion to rescind our, what you call it? I'm sorry. I'm so excited to do this. Like, you can't even think. To rescind our masking requirements
Yeah?
and adopt these guidelines here.
Okay. So with adopted guidelines. Okay. And I'll read what those are when we get to that, but it's your turn, Tara. Second? Okay. Okay, so we have, currently in Blackstone Millville Regional School District, we have a requirement that all people that are present in school buildings during the school day or during any school function, remain masked. At this time, there's a motion on the floor to rescind that requirement, with the exception of there would still need to be masks worn on school buses. There would still need to be masks worn for any visit to the health offices or medical waiting rooms. There would still need to be masks worn for days 6 through 10 if you have tested positive and are returning to school out of your isolation period. There will still need to be masks worn for days 6 through 10 if you're unvaccinated and a non-school close contact to someone. If you are vaccinated but have a non-school close contact, the expectation is that you will wear a mask for days 1 through 10. And symptomatic individuals must wear a mask until their symptoms fully resolve. Did I get them all? Got them all. Any discussion?
Jane, could you clarify the date that this would,
Well,
this motion?
Yep, I can. So this would be, it wasn't in your motion, but can we say in your motion effective February 28th? Which makes me very nervous because it's the day right after vacation, but.
So does that mask mandate for the state end on the 28th, and ours would start on
the 28th?
March 1st?
No, it all ends on the 28th.
Monday, the end of Monday?
Yeah,
or the beginning of Monday?
the DESE mandate was until February 28th. So he is not extending it any further than that. So that would mean on the 28th.
It expires on the last day is the 28th, or the last day is the 27th?
I think it's effective the 28th.
It's effective the 28th. It's not being renewed on the 28th of February. He is not extending it. So it was in place until the 28th, and it is not being extended starting the 28th. So we would be starting the 28th?
Starting the 28th.
Okay. Okay. Make sense, Aaron?
And my other question, when Karen mentioned if you're negative but have symptoms, remain masked. Who's determining? Is it the more than one symptom, or is it use your best judgment, or are kids going to be told that they have symptoms and they?
So again, as we did the last time we changed some of our policy in terms of testing, we have said that now the responsibility lies on family members. And quite frankly, we need to go back to the days of if you have a sick child, they have a runny nose, they have a whatever, now you should test them, but you also need to keep them home. I mean, it's the same old flu, cough, cold, whatever, you're supposed to keep them home. If you don't keep them home and they come to school and they're exhibiting symptoms, it doesn't say 1, 2, or 3. It just says symptomatic individuals. So you got a runny nose, you got a whatever, sore throat, you'll
Fever.
be asked to put a mask on. Who's going to ask you? I have no idea. Who's going to ask them? Hopefully they're family members. Hopefully. We're giving people personal responsibility and families personal responsibility, and in the guidance from DESE, is there a consequence?
Consequence to what? To
Not wearing your mask if you have a runny nose?
No.
No.
We're just asking.
I didn't know if we needed to make a fine line so no one's upset if their child's sent home with a mask on, or if the child comes to school and the teacher feels that the symptoms in the classroom and they're sent to the nurse. So where are we letting that fall?
So how I see that playing out is if there's a student who's not feeling well, they go to the nurse, they have to put a mask on to see the nurse anyhow. So they would go through that. The nurse would evaluate the symptoms. And if they have a fever or if they have a runny nose, frankly, they're probably going to, there'll be a phone call home, I'm sure, regardless. and the child would be asked to mask if there was a medical issue.
Tammy?
Karen, are there going to be provisions? So we're going to get to spring here during this time, and then allergies are going to kick up. Chronic coughs that are related to allergies are going to happen. So if kids have those chronic,
They'll be asked to
symptoms,
mask.
so they're going to just be.
They'll be asked, that's what the policy is.
But I thought under the other, sorry, I don't know what's wrong with me today. I thought at some point there was a way to get a doctor's note to say, I have a chronic condition,
It's
this is it,
documented
and
case of-
I don't have COVID, I don't have to be quarantined, I can come to school. I thought that was in place at some point, because I thought that was in place, no?
Yes,
Okay.
if someone does have, a chronic cough, then, the doctor can write a note saying that they have a chronic cough. And as long as symptoms don't change, if you have a chronic cough and you have a fever, then you need
That's
to
it. Sure.
go home.
Sure, yeah.
So, a lot of it is going to be, the parents' responsibility and the nursing judgment of the situation.
Thank you.
What I do not want us to get into because I think it goes to what you said about being kind and being respectful, and I do not want us to get into you're sneezing, put a mask on, you're not, yours is an allergy, keep your mask off. I don't think that's the responsibility of teachers. I don't think that's the responsibility of nurses. I think that's the responsibility of parents to say, you're feeling well, but you know what? You've got some weird symptoms going on. Wear your mask for a few days, or don't. And I don't know. But we cannot have our staff be the mask police.
Yeah, and I think the scenario that I think that Erin was asking about, how I interpret it, was the students in school already, and they're not feeling well, and they have to go to the nurse. Right. I think there is a fine line between the issue of, every April and May, I get these allergies in my senses. That's probably already a documented situation that most of the nurses know about. If not, I'm sure that the physician would send a note along to the school to say, yep, it's just allergies. It happens every April and May. It should die down once they start taking their allergy meds, or however they're going to frame that. Mm-hmm. And we've received notes like that already throughout this situation, and we've been fine. The students have come back. Again, the issue wasn't the mask that time. It was the quarantine versus being able to attend.
Right.
But I know that the nurses have read those documents, had the students come back to school, and made those accommodations.
Okay, thank you.
Because you're right, Jane, it can't turn into the mask police and all of that other stuff.
Anyone else?
I just want to clarify for families at home, because I'm sure some caught the soundbite of recommendations.
Yep.
And recommendations are just that, not requirements.
If your child's not vaccinated and you do not want your child to wear a mask,
Then
that's your
not.
decision.
So
It's a recommendation from the Department of Public Health and the Department of Education. If you are unvaccinated, you should wear a mask. That is a recommendation, not a requirement.
just before that little soundbite.
Sure, it goes out.
Yeah.
I also caution folks that our highest numbers have tended to come after vacation breaks. So, February 28th may sound like a great day, and whoop, I can whip the mask off, but so can't 1,600 other people, plus the staff. And I would encourage to maybe continue a little bit longer if that's a safety for your family or issue, or because those have been our biggest numbers when we return from the holidays. So I would, be cognizant of that, but our motion on the floor is to rescind our mask mandate with the additional masking requirements as outlined by the Department of Ed and the Department of Public Health. And is there any other further discussion on that?
Jean, can I just
Yeah.
say one? if families and staff would like to opt in to the at-home test, it is recommended to test before returning to school that Sunday, February 27th. So if anyone hasn't opted in and would like to, please reach out to me.
That's a good point. That's great.
Karen, is that an ongoing thing, like if families haven't opted in, but you know, March
You
3rd,
can-
they decide they want to, can they just contact you at any point?
Yes, yep, you can opt in and then opt out at whatever point that you want.
We've had a few families do that too, that signed up, got their first test and decided not to participate.
Because the masking might change how some
How we wanna
families
do
felt
that.
about it too.
Sure.
And Desi has also said that it can be used for symptomatic testing, so.
Anyone else? Okay, the motion on the floor is to rescind the mask requirement effective February 28th. And yet continue or create the additional requirements. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Karen, appreciate it.
Thank you, Karen. Have a good night.
I don't know if your job's gonna get easier or harder, I don't know.
It's ever evolving.
It is ever,
Part of the roller coaster ride,
There you
Karen.
go.
It's part of the roller coaster ride.
Thanks, Karen. Next, we're going to have almost a part two to our conversation on preschool tuition. We had a discussion at a workshop recently, a budget workshop recently, and had an opportunity to look at where our pre-K, our preschool tuition currently falls, and in particular in our region, but we also compared it to others, not in our direct Blackstone Valley area. And Matt's going to talk us through what we have before the school committee this evening in terms of looking at some possible next steps.
So as the front page explains, currently our families pay $60 per month for each day of the week that their child attends. So if a child attends on Mondays for the month, that's $60 for the month. If the child attends on Mondays and Wednesdays for the month, that's $120 for that month. So it's not based on a daily rate because the number of days of each week fluctuates from month to month. So it's a set monthly fee for each day of the week. We currently charge $60 per day and of the week for the month. And we are, as shown before, one of the lowest charges in the region. We discussed what the costs of preschool tuition were, and I was asked to put together an analysis of the tuition versus the expenses. And on the second sheet, you can see that our current annual total for tuition that we are expecting will be $112,800. That's on the peach colored columns on the top. And if you look toward the bottom of the sheet, I've outlined our expenses that we incur on an annual basis for the pre-K, which is $503,130, at least for this specific year, but they average around the 500,000 mark. So with that, we bring that to the school committee to determine whether or not they want to raise the cost of our preschool. In order to be not overzealous and reasonable, we understand that, families do struggle with finances. Our recommendation is simply to raise the preschool tuition rate to $70 per month for each weekday, as opposed to the $60 per month for each weekday. And you can see on the analysis sheet just a small difference that would make in the tuition, which would help potentially cover the cost of a paraeducator, particularly with our growing preschool program, or supplies or anything else where we could allocate that money toward.
Anyone like to make that motion? Anyone at home? No?
So moved.
Okay, Aaron, I'll second it, just so we can have discussion. What is the concern?
I have two concerns right off the top. And
Okay.
one of them is the minimum contribution for families towards the coming school year for the budget. The other is the poverty level in our communities coming out of COVID, the lack of employment or the employed families. However, there has to be some recoupment of cost. I'm not sure the $70 is enough.
I'm torn between seeing still the large gap we have to what preschool costs, but yet not wanting to charge more at the same time. It's, yeah.
I understand that.
Anyone else?
I share the same sentiments. Looking at the budget, I'm having a really tough time when we discussed last week, as Tammy very well pointed out, that our budget shortage is not going to be staples and paper. It's got to be something big, which is going to ruffle feathers. But looking at these numbers, I don't think we should raise rates, but I also think we need to rethink the pre-K program.
What do you mean by that?
I think it costs us entirely too much to run. And it would free up a lot of budget and affect the least amount of students.
Well, we legally have
You
to
have to-
offer.
it's just- that's what
Sorry,
it's like.
we legally have to offer a portion of the program.
So, as a regional district, do we have the option to regionalize with another district for those services?
So we don't, as a school committee, have the authority to regionalize with another region. Towns have the authority to reach out to other towns. We don't have the authority to do that. But we have learned that having our students who are required to receive services go elsewhere to receive those services costs us exponentially much more than having those. I mean, we've been trying to bring people back for services, not send them out for services. So I don't think whatever arrangement you could make with another community would be as efficient as having our own program.
I think it would double our costs if we tried to do that.
Yeah. Or if not triple.
There's also a piece to just mention, and Jill, if you want to speak to this, by all means, feel free to come forward and address it. But there's also a special education piece that's really important about this in regards to numbers and percents
Role
within
models.
a classroom. For our students with special needs, our youngest, and the role models that have to be
So,
percentage-wise.
along that question, how many of these families are going to be English language learners?
How many of our
We
ELL?
have a small, we do have a population of students who are English languages in a preschool. It's growing. But what Dr. DeFalco did mention, our classrooms cannot grow beyond a certain amount of number, 15. And that would be, there's a percentage that have to be our role models and a certain percentage for special education. So that's what creates that. But yes, we do have some English language learners who have come into our preschool.
So we're bound in three different directions here is what I'm hearing. We've got SPED cost, we've got English language learning cost, and we have the legally obligated cost of providing a pre-K.
And I think that's why at the federal level, there's been so much conversation about universal pre-K,
Yep.
because everybody's bound to those same things, and I know that hasn't gotten any traction yet, but that's why I think there's so much conversation, because we all have to do it. think of our size, right? Think of how small
Yeah.
we actually are, and look at what we're spending because of those
So-
provisions.
My next question comes in numbers-wise. About what percentage, without naming total or complete numbers, what percentage are we looking at for special ed children and the ESL, or the English language learners?
The majority of our students in our early intervention program are special education students or our role models. Right now, we have a very small percentage of preschool students, maybe 5 total, who are English language learners in our preschool right now.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, the majority of our pre-K are special ed students.
No, it's split with role
So the
models.
majority of our students have to be role models, and, because there's a certain percentage you need to adhere to in the classroom. So say just as an example, I don't have the exact numbers, if I have 15 students in the class, say, more than 50% need to be role models. There are specific numbers that you can look at those, so we always are looking at our classrooms, but the programs are there for our special education students and preschool programs. We do have one substantially separate preschool classroom for our very intensive preschool students, but all our other sessions are integrated.
Okay, thank you.
Tammy?
And I think it's important to note that the substantially separate population, if you try to send them somewhere else, your tuition is, that's where your tuition is going to quadruple.
Yes.
Because, and you lose power over them because you get into that where
Well,
that
sure.
district is making decisions for the kid that you're paying for, and you're basically writing them a blank check,
Well-
which is what annoys us in other scenarios.
And not only when you lose them, you have a harder time to get them back.
Right.
Yeah.
I empathize with the struggling families. I understand the environment that we're in, but I would argue that our costs are significantly lower than any other option they have. That doesn't mean we should just raise them, but they're significantly lower. And when we're talking about $10 a month, if you send your child on for 5 days, you're talking $50 a month, which is significant, which is tremendously significant. But that's saying you have to send them for 5 days. You have the option to do 2 or 3 or 4. And so I think that there are options, but I think the value of trying to offset the cost a little bit helps that bottom line that we can't seem to offset.
Yeah.
So for me, while I never want to, raise prices ever if I didn't have to, I feel like we have an opportunity to try to bring in a little extra to offset the cost of the program and not necessarily break any family, maybe hurt them some, but not break them, I hope not, or at least give them some other choices. But I think we need to do that, given the other shortfalls that we know we have as well.
And I'm sure it was mentioned the last time when the comparisons were looked at. It was looked at for towns that were similar to our socioeconomic background. So just to make sure you didn't think, oh my goodness, you're looking at a town that may have, a different level, but it's
I feel
not.
like the 70 still keeps us at the
Really?
low end of that
Yeah.
And
chart,
even
right?
compared to, private preschool, like
Well,
really
that's
low.
really low compared to private,
Really
yeah.
low.
And the other benefit is keeping our kiddos here. They're starting with us in preschool. We have standards that we follow. We have a curriculum that we follow, which really is preparing our students for that next step with us in kindergarten.
And anyone that's tuning in at home, the district is still absorbing a little less than 80% of the costs, even with the increase. So I think it ends up being about 75% or something, if you have the numbers exact. So it's still a huge amount of the overall
The
cost.
increase in funding would be great. I'm just, as we're sitting here talking, and, my thought process goes to, where can we cut something else out of the budget so that we can afford this? And I know the answer, nowhere. But we've got to cut something somewhere to bring it down, to keep from pushing everybody over the edge. Now, we're talking about raising the rates. I would like to see more in this, but at the same time, going back to my original comment, I don't think that our communities can bear more than this. I would like to see $75 or $80 a day. But again, I don't think that our community can bear it.
I mean, honestly, this $60 rate is cheaper than a 15-year-old babysitter.
Yep,
Just saying for the
Yep.
record. My
Yes.
kids make more than that to babysit.
yep.
And this is with
No,
a
I-
whole educational component, not just.
Well, all right,
a
I mean, I'm
babysitter
just
sitting
pointing,
at
well,
home.
that's kind of my point, like, you're
Yeah.
getting a certified teacher, here's the column, and, meanwhile, others are paying my,
Next door neighbor
now
or the whatever.
18-year-old
Yep.
with, $12 an hour, so, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, there is a motion on the floor to increase the pre-K rate to $70 per month per day. Did I say that right, Matt?
Per day of the week.
Per day
yes.
of the week, for days of the week that you choose. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes.
And just as a public service announcement, everyone's been waiting for the preschool forms to come out, but now that this has been approved, they will be out tomorrow. We'll be working on that to get those out.
Out tomorrow.
Yes,
Preschool
that's our
forms out
plan.
tomorrow.
Hot off the presses.
Thank you,
Are
Joe.
those
there
forms
still a
available
lottery, Jill?
online for electronic?
We don't know yet, so we'll
Oh.
have to get everything in to see if we need a lottery, but we're hoping we're gonna be able to get as many families who want it.
Great.
So we'll know.
Great.
Jill, Tim had a question.
Are those forms going to be electronic or going to be on paper?
Right now, they're all on paper.
We don't know, Tim, we don't have that in the budget yet.
Yeah, not yet, but right now they're paper.
Luxury,
Again.
luxury.
Electronics cost a whole lot less than paper.
Well,
That is a perfect segue, Tim.
getting,
To
but getting the
FY
electronics
23.
costs more than buying a ream of paper.
There's
So
that
turn,
rock
you
and a hard
save
place
money.
we're still stuck between.
Okay,
So speaking of the rock and the hard place, Carrie, we'll use that segue and Tim's segue to move us into the next item, which is our discussion around our FY23 budget. What you have in your packet, and I'm going to actually turn this over to Matt in a moment to walk through, but what you have in your packet are a couple of very important documents. The first is the preliminary revenue and assessment sheet. Just behind that, you have what we're referring to as what's out. So what's been removed from the draft FY23 budget. And we're going to talk about that in a moment, but what you noticed at first glance, I am sure, when you looked at the what's out sheet is that we have worked very closely with our principals, with our cost center managers since our last workshop, which was, I believe, last Thursday, if I
last
remember
Thursday.
correctly. And a shout out to Tara for reminding us we needed to have that additional meeting this month. So Tara, thank you for that, because that was a critically important meeting to have. So from last Thursday to today, we have done a lot of work. Matt's going to walk us through that, but has resulted in about a reduction of 1.9 million from our budget. That was not pleasant. It wasn't easy, but we worked very hard to preserve the programs and opportunities for all of our students. We kept them at the forefront through that process. The reason I'm mentioning that piece first is because those numbers had to then be imported into the preliminary revenue and assessment sheet that Matt's going to talk us through. And I just want to remind everybody that might be tuning in at home that this is preliminary. Our budget certification and public hearing is on March 10th. So we still have some time to do additional work, and we're looking forward to that additional work. So with that, Matt?
so wait, before you go to that,
Jane.
can you just tell us on this sheet, as we're listening to Matt talk about this sheet, what's the significance of yellow and white?
The yellow items are the items that the school committee asked to be removed.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Did I get that right, Matt?
So Not exactly. They are part of what the school committee has to be removed. They are the costs that we said we might be able to fund from other sources.
Oh.
So the highlighted rows have notes next to them. So you can see some of them are like the Scholastic magazines that we said we could probably get the PTOs to fund these.
So yes, and is what you
Yes,
mean.
and I apologize.
Voted yes.
Oh, we voted yes.
Oh, they voted yes to fund the Scholastic.
Excellent.
good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yes, I had heard that. So thank you very much.
That's great, Tara.
All right, so go for it, Matt.
Sure. So if you start on the top of the sheet,
Which
You'll-
sheet, Matt?
of the assessment sheet,
Who's
I'm
saying
just
what?
I'll be walking through the preliminary assessment, revenue and assessment sheet. The colorful one, not the bright yellow one.
one that's in really big
Not the
type.
bright yellow one.
The one that's in really big type.
Exactly, as always. So if we look at the top numbers, the all other number that you're seeing there, that's in purple-ish, is the number that we were able to get to with the reductions that we just recently made. Above it, the school choice and the charter sending tuition, as I mentioned, those are given to us based on the numbers that the Department of Ed has. You can see, I'll point this out again, that between our school choice and our charter school, there's over $1.5 million in charges that we will have to pay for. That those costs incorporated with the other district-based costs bring the total budget to $28,562,194. You can see below that we begin to apply the revenue streams that we will see through the course of the year. The first one highlighted in pink is an additional use of circuit breaker. You'll see circuit breaker for the year, which we would be receiving through the course of the year, toward the bottom. But circuit breaker is a fund that you are allowed to accumulate to some extent to cover additional special education costs that may be unexpected. While we certainly do not want to deplete our fund, we felt that, again, to get this budget to a place where the towns would be able to bear the cost, we are applying additional funds. So you'll see below, there's $630,000 of circuit breaker applied through the state revenue column, and that's an additional $175,000 in circuit breaker. As we spoke about earlier, you'll see the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds. Those numbers are the combined amounts of what we planned originally on spending in FY23, plus monies that, due to some changes that we've made, we will see an ability to roll those funds over to be spent in FY23, though they're FY22 funds. The ESSER 2 funds can be spent for 2 years, for this year and next year. The ESSER 3 funds can roll forward until FY24. So we are pushing some of those funds that we were going to spend this year to next year. And then finally, the additional piece at the top is the potential use of E&D. We are anticipating that we will get our E&D certified at some point very soon. And the recommendation that we are putting forward is to put $150,000 of the E&D funds directly back toward the budget. We typically use those funds to cover one-time costs, either curriculum purchases or instructional materials. We try not to put them towards salary expenses or recurring costs because we don't want to start depleting the E&D funds that we have. Below that, you can see the estimated state revenues that we'll be receiving. I won't read every single number to everyone because I know that you can see them. But you can see we have our Chapter 70 receipt, which is that whopping $30 additional that we get per student this coming year. We have our regional transportation reimbursement, our choice, our charter reimbursements, and then our entitlement grants are below that. We also, in the column, have included the monies that the district raises on our own, which would include our athletics revenues, the pre-K tuition that we were just discussing. As you could see, that could be a potential change now as we move forward, where that number could be raised a bit. We also have our rental of classrooms and some of our other fees, and that leaves the remainder of the cost, $13,437,834 dollars. And what we can see below is the percentage of student split. Blackstone, as of our October count, this year had 1,147 students actively attending our district. Millville had 369 students, which brings the percentage split for next year to 75.66% for Blackstone, 24.34% for Millville. I am going to mention the capital costs, as I'm sure the towns know. Those are set. We don't have any control over them. Those costs pay for previous borrowing that the district had done with the permission of the towns to pay for the roofs, the boiler projects, and some of the other major capital plans that we have acted on. Additionally, the capital assessment this year does include the cost of the asbestos remediation that we discussed. That's a $225,000 cost that we were given by our consultants to try to take care of that piece. Again, that's not going to remove all of the asbestos from the building. It's not going to eliminate the problem. It is to remediate some small section of it and to manage the problem moving forward through the course of FY23. That will end up being additional funds in FY24 and probably so on and so forth. I actually met with the Department of Labor Standards today, and they were in agreement with our plan. They said that we have the permission from them to move forward with that $225,000 of expenses to remediate some of the mechanical rooms and then maintain a cleaning process. But they are actually waiting to see what comes of our potential statement of interest. That is one of the things that they've been holding on to, is that they will allow us to see where things stand with MSBA before they start saying, no, you absolutely have to remove all of these materials from the building. So if we remove the capital costs, we can see on the bottom the percent increase for each of the towns over the FY22 budget is 3.03% for Blackstone and 1.02% for Millville. I won't go into the specifics of the assessments. You can see the pieces of them listed, but I do want to mention last year's assessment minus capital. Last year's assessment to Blackstone was $9,865,799, and the operating assessments to Millville were $3,239,741. I'd like to draw your attention to the section where it says minimum local contribution. The minimum local contribution for Blackstone increased by $480,865. That is the cost that the state has said you are mandated to pay as a town. The total increased cost of the operating piece for Blackstone over the FY22 is $299,301. So you are hearing me correctly. The increased cost for the entire budget for the operating piece is less than the increase in minimum local contribution. For Millville, the total increase in minimum local contribution is $153,509, which is, you can see the percents next to them. The total increase of the operating budget to Millville proposed in this draft budget is $32,993, which again is significantly lower than the increase that is seen simply due to the minimum local contribution requirement. Are there questions about any of these numbers or the assessments?
The MLC, the minimum local contribution, is just staggering, Matt, that number continues to climb per what the state is expecting. To me, that is an absolutely outrageous number, that the state is requiring Blackstone to pay almost $500,000 more, and Millville $153,000. I mean, there's 6.8 and 6.7% increases are just out of control. But we have no say over that.
Correct.
So is that due to a shift in percentages, like the percent that the state provides
Yep.
versus
What
what
they
they
want
have
the
the
towns
towns?
to
They
provide.
just shift it.
The state is continuously
Yep.
trying to shift responsibility to the
towns.
local education authority, to the towns.
So it's not that we're going to, it's difficult to articulate. But I feel like that's so important. The minimum local contribution doesn't mean that we're gonna be getting that, like, as a district. Like, we're not getting that additional from the towns. It's not coming, like, on top of our existing budget. It's a shift. So the state
Yeah,
shifts.
So each year, the state sets a foundation budget, which is the very bare minimum that a district is required to spend on all of its operations and its students. In a regional district, that cost is split between the member towns, and the minimum local contribution is the amount that the state is saying the towns have to contribute. So when they set that foundation budget, they say Blackstone will owe this specific amount, Millville will owe this specific amount, and our Chapter 70 funds will cover the remainder of that amount. And that will get us to the minimum foundation budget, which is the very least that the state says we have to do for our students.
So we have to spend but we all know that the minimum foundation budget will not educate the
No.
children in
Nope.
any school system across this Commonwealth.
That is correct.
So while the state does contribute about half of our budget, their piece of the pie
Right.
is going to continue to shrink,
Yes.
essentially, while they expect
All the
each
Yes.
And
individual
that
goal-
shrinks.
The goal is to
Yeah,
get,
The towns have to pick
Pay
it up.
more.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to say, and I
the
did,
goal
I
is to
failed.
get to a 59-41% split. But they're slowly shifting towns toward paying increased costs. And they actually factor in, we certainly won't get into the specifics, but there's an aggregate wealth model that they use to calculate what it is that the towns are able to afford to pay, and then they come up with their minimum local contribution.
And Matt, I believe the FY '21 to FY '22 difference for Blackstone, because I think Millville actually saw a very slight decrease.
Yep.
But Blackstone saw an increase, I think it was around 150 to 180,000, just in the minimum local contribution. Do I have that number correct? It was somewhere in that range, I
I
think.
thought it was bigger than that.
I
Yeah.
don't
It was
have
around
it in front of me
6%
right
last year.
now. I can try to pull it up.
I believe the total increase was around 180,000, and I thought that all but 40,000 of that was from the state. But I just mentioned that because we continue to see this
Yeah.
steady climb of minimum local contribution.
This was, again, I always take a look at the last few years. Again, I know, I'm trying to pull up a document now where I might be able to get that specific number. Give me 1 second and I will tell you. So, last year, so for FY '21, there was a decrease in Blackstone's minimum local contribution. Oh, I'm sorry. 5% change. Nope. I apologize. I'm trying to see everything on my smaller computer screen. So in FY '20, Blackstone saw a 4.41% increase. Millville saw a 5.02% increase. In FY '21, Blackstone saw a 4.91 and Millville saw a 5.06. FY '22, Blackstone only saw a 1.81% increase. So last year's increase,
A little bit less.
the one that we're dealing with this year, is significantly lower. Millville saw a reduction of 0.8% in their MLC for FY '22. And now take a 1.81% increase from 21 to 22 and a 0.8%, a negative 0.8% increase from 21 to 22. And this year, Blackstone saw a 6.83% increase, and Millville saw a 6.76% increase. So you can see that there was a significant, dramatic jump in the amount of MLC. And you can see those percentages compared to what the actual percent increase is of the assessments. There was, as Dr. DeFalco mentioned, there was a lot of work and a lot of hard decisions and a lot of reductions that were made in order to get to that number.
But I want to be very clear to the committee and the public that these are operational dollars, with the exception of the ongoing capital that's been there every year, and the asbestos. They do not include any additional capital projects that we may need to include, nor do they include any OPEB contributions.
That is correct.
Both of which have to happen at our joint
Joint
town meeting to have a discussion on how we address that. So these are those increases without the other two components.
And that's right, Jane, I'm glad you mentioned that, because those two items, the OPEB and then the new capital improvement work, were intentionally not included in this because we have a series of meetings coming up with both Blackstone and Millville boards and committees to get all of us on the same page, to make sure that we can do collectively something that works for everybody. So you'll see that flagged at the bottom of the,
To be announced.
yeah,
To
at
be
the sheet.
determined. And it's in, yeah, it is in yellow for those with the eyesight to be able to see it. All right, well,
Are we all right to shift then to
Shift
the
and
what's
adjust.
been removed? And how we got to a 3% increase minus the capital for Blackstone and a 1% increase minus the capital for Millville. So in front of you, you have essentially a two-page overview. The first is front and back, so you can see both sides. And again, the highlights are items that the committee asked to be removed at our last workshop with the notes, so you can see the additional comments and feedback there. But this gives a really good snapshot of what has been removed from the budget to get it to the reduction of $1,882,008.09. I think one of the things I do want to share, you'll notice that, and we had this discussion at the last workshop, and I don't recall who said it this evening, but for us to get to the number we needed to get to make our budget still meet the needs of our blueprint and manageable for our community is more than reams of paper and paper clips and markers and supplies and those kinds of things. So what you will see at the very bottom of the second page are 4 positions that we looked at reducing the budget by, in addition to everything else that's listed here, to get to the 1.8, almost 1.9 million. And what has been identified is essentially one position in each of the 4 buildings. Now, what is in the budget still is the shared academic affairs leader that we had talked about sharing with Bellingham, and I know that we discussed that at the last workshop. The full-time athletic director, which I know was also discussed, and the groundskeeper, which is not a full-time position, but was a shared part-time position. What I'm suggesting to the committee to consider is removing those 3 positions from the budget and putting the teaching positions back in, so that we can ensure that we restore the integrity of the instructional programming and remove the other positions. And I know that these are really tough decisions and conversations to have, but at this juncture, with everything that's been reduced, and I know, Tim, when you had mentioned earlier, going back in and looking to see, there really isn't anywhere else to go at this point from the 1.9. It's quite amazing we actually got here. But I would suggest making those, or ask the committee to make those adjustments to keep the integrity of the instructional programming and try to keep the budget where it is.
Well, looking through the pages here, the 2.5 pages, I noticed that the athletic director and the instructional assistant was missing, and the groundskeeper as well. But as we're talking about this, and on the 3rd sheet, you were talking about eliminating teachers, and then you balance that out with coming back and saying eliminating the other 3 positions that we were talking about. When I joined the committee last year, one of the big things that we talked about was not pushing the budget so hard and adding positions only to come back and cut them later.
And here
Any
we are.
day that we eliminate teachers, we eliminate the opportunity to educate our children. We cannot eliminate teachers. So to look at it and say, okay, we're eliminating the athletic director. How can we take those added duties and get those taken care of? Who's going to meet the needs of, or who's going to meet the requirements of ordering the jerseys and getting the football helmets taken care of and things like that?
We still have our part-time. We're not
Yes.
losing the part-time, we're losing a position
The
of a new
full-time.
full-time.
And the groundskeeper.
If we choose to go in that direction.
And the groundskeeper position would actually be a true reduction because that wasn't a new position. We actually reconstituted custodial dollars to get that position in there. So to your point about not adding to reduce, nothing that we are recommending this evening, i.e. the groundskeeper, the athletic director, or the academic affairs leader, none of those are positions that are existing positions with the exception of the groundskeeper, and that position was money that we repurposed. We just didn't fill something to create that. So just to ease the concern around that, because you're right, we had that conversation. So
Tammy's.
I just have a clarifying question. These FTEs, are these, I don't know, truly cut, or are these cut from the proposed, like, the proposal that we had previously on our worksheets? From
Those
the
are
workshops?
reductions
Those are
in
From
Staff.
current people,
current
Yep.
people.
Staff reduction.
not the
Those
additional.
are not,
Those are
that is
already-
not
those
the
are in there.
removal. Yeah, there were
Those, the
positions
business
that were
person,
removed.
They're in there as
0.6.
well.
I didn't see the reason I asked that was because I didn't see on these line items, I did not see the 0.6
No, we
or
chose to
0.4,
keep that last time.
whichever side.
Because the principal of the building prioritized that 0.6 because it was for equity of the class sizes and programs offered to the middle school students.
Okay.
And the reason that you don't see the 0.6 or the athletic director or the academic leader is because the committee asked us to keep those in.
Yep.
So that's why they're not on here. We left the items in that the committee asked, and then we went through the process with the principals and the cost center managers to reduce in other places.
So,
But so I guess what I'm getting at is,
Yeah.
we added a 0.6 somewhere, we're saying we're taking off a 1.0, but we're really taking off 0.4,
Well, but they,
but just in a different position.
Oh.
But when we're
Yeah.
talking about monies,
correct,
that's what I'm
Correct.
just, and I don't have my other
yes, correct.
little chart, so we're really, I mean, and I'm not saying like that's, you know, like that's a small deal, I'm just trying to calculate the pluses and
If you're,
minuses in
if
the
you're
various
talking dollars
areas.
and cents, yes.
Yes, thank
But
you,
if you're
Jane.
talking positions and bodies, one person who is now part-time will become full. One person who is full will be asked to find an alternative.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, I just,
So I just, I
cut and dry
cannot,
as it shows.
similar along the lines that Tim was discussing. And I have been somebody who, for the past 8 years, has advocated for administrative positions. And I think building a team is important, because I think the supports to help people do their jobs better, is critical to doing the job better. However, not at the sake of not having the people to do the job. So I did not vote for the athletic director previously. But I cannot justify in a budget having a full-time athletic director and losing 4 teachers. I cannot. You know, we talk about swords we're willing to die on, and for me, that's one of them. I
If we're-
understand the importance, I understand the desire to reach out in the community, and perhaps, you know, next year's school committee will look at that as one of the committees they want to have, and have a committee on athletics and really study what are the sports that are supported by the community, and what are the sports that are needed to be developed in the community, and maybe that, you know, that's a focus, and maybe the committee takes that on, but I cannot justify $78,000 a year for an athletic director when we can't put a teacher in the classroom in front of kids.
Going back to what Dr. DeFalco was saying at the end of this discussion, and I want to clarify this because you were saying that you have the minus in here for the full-time educators, but you want to forego the 3 positions we had with the groundskeeper, the athletic director, and the instructional whatever to keep these 4 teachers.
That's what he's recommending.
Well, I'm on board with that because we cannot remove educators from in front of children at the cost of, and I hate to say it, extracurricular activities. But in that, I do have questions here, and this is on the side of the paper with the Wacom Intuos Pro Creative Pen Tablet. About midway down the page, we have,
UCC dual enrollment section, this one. The back of the second page, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Good,
Oh,
yeah.
first thing, okay, yeah.
okay, about midway down the page, we have math materials for $10,000, math textbooks for $14,000.
Yes.
And then we jump down here and pre-purchase of math curriculum for $150,000. I'm seeing $175,000, and I'm asking questions. If we're buying a new curriculum, why are we buying textbooks in addition to that, as well as a new math materials?
We're not. So those are removed.
These are the removals.
So in the budgets, the principals had put in this case, 10,000 in one line and 14,000 in another line.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're purchasing a new program, which we're trying to do out of this year's budget, which is why you see the program cost also here as a possible expense to reduce next year's budget by, because we're going to try to buy it now. So we're going to try to buy the program now, and we were able to reduce the additional asks for other supplies and mathematics supplies and materials because we're going to buy the program. So because of that, we didn't need the 150 that we initially budgeted for, and we don't need the 10,000 or 14,000 additional materials because we're going to get that in the package that we go to purchase.
That's why,
Does
that's
that
why
make
it's on
sense?
the off list.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand then.
Sure.
So all of this 2.5 pages,
Is that,
off.
everything that we've taken off,
yep.
with the exception of the three that you mentioned, which is the athletic director, the groundskeeper, and the curriculum.
Right.
Yeah, they're not.
Well, there were other
they-
things we
there
kept
were,
on.
Yeah.
There were other
There-
things we
there were
kept
some
on.
other things, yeah.
Those are just the
If you
big
look
ticket,
at our
like the
last-
real
yeah.
expensive. And just so folks that are tuning in understand, we are moving forward with the purchase of a new math series. I actually just think we can do it this year. And when we have those final numbers, I will be bringing it forward to the school committee. I did recently apply for a grant. I applied for the whole amount for the K-8 program, which was about $150,000. I don't know if I'll get the whole amount, but the Department of Education is offering a mathematics acceleration funding opportunity. They're not calling it a grant, it's a funding opportunity, it's a grant. And they're
Money's
gonna,
money.
right, they're gonna pay the vendors directly. So I put that application in this week for the entire amount, and hope to hear from them by early to mid-March. And hopefully that's an expense that they will cover for us, so we don't
Okay.
have to worry about that.
So, and with all this, we're still able to keep our social worker?
Yes,
Okay.
yep.
Jason, can you just help me understand the numbers? Because we're using a $78,000 athletic director, but it's not really an additional $78,000 because we had a part-time number. So that's less than $78,000. And then I thought the shared person with Bellingham, whatever that title is, was about 53 or 50. So that would take care of one of these teachers. Athletic director, presumably, if I remember correct of what the part-time number was, would do another, potentially put back another FTE. But where do you get the other 100,000 for the other two
So-
FTEs, right? It's not quite balancing?
It's not 100%, it's about 150. So with the athletic director, with the the shared academic leader position.
So that
and the
was how much?
groundskeeper- which one?
The shared person.
50,000.
50 even. The athletic director, what's the full-time minus the part-time number?
72,000. Approximately 72,000.
Okay,
Because the stipend's about $6,000.
okay.
And then the groundskeeper was roughly, was it 40, 45? Something like that? I don't have that number right in front of me, but it was around that.
Okay.
So it's close. It gets us in striking distance.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But you're right, Tammy, it's not an exact match for match, but it gets us close.
Jane.
Yes.
So I have a couple questions. First, the groundskeeper. Is that the position that we discussed putting in place to maintain our fields that we are currently resurfacing and redoing?
Yeah.
So how do we spend that money now if it's not going to be taken care of properly?
So we have traditionally had the grounds work done by our building custodians, and they get paid overtime for that. We put the groundskeeper position in specifically for, taking care of the fields and the properties, but for many years past, the custodians have been doing it. And remember, we also added the director of facilities, which, while that individual is an administrator, it's not going to be mowing the lawn. They are actively involved in some of the work that is happening with respect to the fields, oversight, and they actually do chip in also.
Okay, so we pay overtime versus another position. What is the cost difference there?
I don't have that analysis here.
Okay.
That really doesn't make sense to pay overtime. If we can't afford our normal operating expense, then why are we going to pay overtime when we really can't afford overtime?
The overtime, and we've done this analysis in the past, and that was what made us choose to leave it being paid by overtime. Benefits are a huge cost for the salaried employee
Whether it's benefits.
versus the overtime expenses.
That's where the savings comes in.
So then two other questions on this. We have here that we are now not including electrical expenses and gas expenses.
We'll reduce
How?
them. We think
You
we
know,
can
they,
reduce
those
them
were
that
just
much.
reductions.
So that was at the last workshop where we looked at the 5-year actual for each one of the lines in our budget. And so we had all the projections for FY '23, and then Matt and I worked backwards and looked at FY '22, what we're currently spending, 21, 20, and 19, and I think 18. I think we went all the way back. And we did an analysis of what we're spending in every single line, including the utilities, so that we could forecast a little more accurately. So in that forecasting and in that 5-year analysis of what we actually spent, we are feeling that we're able to save what we've outlined here in these utility costs.
Well, and those of us that have worked with Matt over the years, he has a tendency to be a very conservative budgeter. He should do my home budget. It would be appreciative, I think, but, and I think we're, to get this number on the first sheet, we've pushed him to his limit. So he's probably not sleeping well. But we've been, the things have been good. When we look at those sheets that we're gonna look at, later, there's not much red on them. There may be more red next year. We may come closer than we wanna come. But given the past history, it looks doable.
Yep, we are still comfortable with the numbers that we put in. I have stated it openly, it is certainly not my most conservative budget. And, to one of the conversations we had before, Tim, there were reductions made from custodial and grounds costs that some were made from this line and some were made from that line. We took wherever we could find it. So more than likely, we may see some variances where there's some red and some black and some red and some black in like the 4,000 series. But I have a comfort level with the 4,000 series
We'll balance
balancing
out.
them out.
Yeah.
So one of the exercises that I did was, in addition to going through the individual lines and working on this with the director of facilities, I pulled up the 5-year trend for the entirety of the 4,000 series. And while, we went line by line, that was, we wanted to check to make sure we weren't overdoing it. And I could see, okay, we'll be all right if we're somewhere similar to the total expenses in the custodial grounds lines for the last 5 years, even though certain lines may be lower and certain lines may be a little higher. So I did discuss with Dr. DeFalco that we may have to make some adjustments moving forward in the beginning of FY '23 when I start going over the budget review sheets. I may need to change where some funds are, being drawn from, or where the chargers are being placed to, so that we don't see those little red here, black here, red here. So.
And then my last question is more on looking forward. So, here we have like a 3% reduction in insurance costs, which insurance is just gonna make me want to vomit every time I look at those numbers. And dental insurance, and that, when we look at trying to balance this budget and understanding that those costs are only gonna continue to skyrocket, how does this, removing this, how does that help us next year?
Yep, so these numbers, I can actually say these numbers were really good. Because these numbers were estimates on where we would land when we got our final rates from our insurance companies. So originally, we were assuming there would be a 6% increase in insurance. However, we factored in the 3% discount that we were going to get because of going into that Medicaid plan for the over 65. And then we estimated an increase in dental costs. We then, once we got some preliminary numbers, that's when I felt more comfortable making those changes and those reductions to say, we'll land at about a total of a 3% increase in health and even lower in dental. And I actually just confirmed with our insurance provider yesterday that these numbers are accurate. So our health insurance rate came in at a 2.9% increase, and our dental rate, which you will see, it says a 7% reduction. They actually came back with a negative 0.25% with our dental, and I pushed on them and said, well, I've already budgeted for -1, so you need to go back and you need to talk to them. Compared to the health, we all know that the dental is not as significant. You need to get me the -1. And I got an email this morning saying that our dental rates are now set at a -1%.
Okay. So, but in the future, are we gonna have to try to figure out how to add another 80,000 back in our budget for when they raise rates again?
Your
Yeah.
concerns around health insurance are absolutely legitimate.
Spot on.
And we,
Yep.
you know, every year, we have to go through that process and trying to make it work. But I think you're bringing up a bigger point to me, Amanda, which is, you know, kind of using every chip you have to try to get to a number that's manageable. And when the state continues to increase the minimum local contribution by 5 or 6%, we're running out of chips.
Exactly.
And I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah.
That is exactly the case.
Yep.
The good thing about insurance is every single person who has insurance realizes that it's not an us problem, it's an insurance industry problem.
Right.
Where I think sometimes people think like we, you know, that it's us. But I think
Right.
insurance, like medical, everybody's like having that issue where your coverage is going up and your coverage is going down, but your premiums are going up and that kind of thing. So I feel like those conversations, at least people, there's no blame game going there amongst ourselves, you know, of town
Yeah.
people or other boards or that kind of stuff. It is what it is.
It is, but to Amanda's point, as it continues to increase and those numbers, I mean, that's one less.
Right. That's, I mean,
Teacher
is
we
that,
get
do
to
we,
put on
yes,
board.
exactly. Do we have to let a
That's
teacher
real
go so we
dollars.
can pay insurance?
Yeah,
That's,
That's real
one less
dollars.
thing we can consider, and, you know, we, again, I'll say it 500,000 times again. This does not include new capital, minus asbestos, and does not include OPEB. So these reductions, or not adding new, because some are just not adding new, but some are reductions, are not sustainable over the long haul. Like, they're not, I don't know what happens next year, or the next year, or the next year. But, you know, something's
Something's got to give.
gotta give. Something's gotta, but I, of the budget that sits in front of us, I would propose removing the, shared leadership position with Bellingham, the full-time groundskeeper, or the groundskeeper position, and the full-time athletic director. And I'll entertain that motion if anybody wants to make it.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
Second. Okay. Is there any discussion on it?
I do have a question on the Bellingham piece. Because we have already discussed that with them, is that going to be detrimental to any future partnership with them for us to now renege on that?
I don't think so. I had a conversation with their superintendent today, or yesterday, as a matter of fact, about the position itself. They have their budget workshop Saturday. So, you know, I let him know that we were having our second meeting this evening. You know, that the position got to the first conversation, but I wasn't so sure I'd make it on the second conversation. I didn't want to speak for the committee. I wouldn't do that. But let him know that I would get back to him before his workshop on Saturday.
Do they already have that person?
No.
So it's not a, okay.
No. And I think they get it. I mean, my sense is they're gonna, this same conversation we're having, they're gonna have, because their MLC also went up by quite a bit. So I think everybody's in that boat and trying to talk through what to prioritize. These are awful decisions to make. It's not that, you know, but at the end of the day, teachers in front of kids.
And to Amanda's, or Tammy's point, I think putting those 4 teacher positions probably will increase the bottom line a little bit.
A little
It's
bit.
probably bigger than the other one.
Yeah.
So it probably will increase that percentage a little bit.
Well, in that, I challenge you to find some other way to make that even out and be a zero cost.
I will be
Got it.
back at the, be back at the slicing board.
Yeah, to see what we can do.
To see what we can do, yeah.
I already don't have any hair, Tim. How far are we going with this?
Maybe I need to lose mine too.
This, I will tell you, this
We'll get there.
exercise is gonna get me to where Jason is.
You started where I was, and I
That's true.
started where you were.
That's true.
And I don't know how, if, without exaggeration.
That's true.
Well, that
Any other
happens.
discussion?
I guess my final
Yeah.
question is probably a Jill question, but is the special education number reduction feasible? Is that a true thing?
Jill, do you want to speak to that?
And I mean, I know that could be 2 out-of-district placements and
Right.
you're good to go, but.
This was a deep dive as well into everything, out of district, all the
Well, I
transportation.
appreciate the leadership folks who had, as is in some years, have wonderful dreams and hopes and options, and to really go in and say, what are we doing now that we don't have to do, and what can we, I appreciate that effort that has to go into that.
So that number, we took another hard look, and you know that we've been working really hard at developing our programs here to bring students back into the district. So the majority of that funding is tuition that we will save for students who might be aging out or coming back into the district.
Okay.
So, yep.
Like I said, I know you can get to that pretty quickly with some of those moves, but
Yes.
I didn't know.
Savings
if they
on
were-
transportation, so
Yeah.
it's not often you'll see that number from me.
Well, as one special ed person to another, I
Yes.
was like, well, how's she going there? Let me know your
Yep.
secret.
Absolutely.
We're having the same conversations elsewhere.
Yeah, it's that tuition, that transportation, looking
Okay.
at creative ways to make it still work.
Great.
Thank you, Jill.
Any other discussion on the motion? Motion on the floor to remove the groundskeeper, the full-time athletic director, and the shared leadership coordinator position, and reinstate the 4 teaching positions. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions?
Yes.
1 abstention. Okay. And that has passed.
Thank you. And that concludes my formal report.
May I make a request? Because as we're moving people for a few, not for today requests, but could we have sort of like a flow chart of who is in the district at this point, like sort of from the top to the bottom, just like who do we have?
Like an
when we talk-
organization chart?
Sure.
So-
Because we're talking, we've added a facilities direct, I mean, we repurposed a position to be a facilities director, so I just want to choose my words wisely. I see some custodial numbers on here, like who do we have going now? Because I think as we dig deeper, as we try to kind of realize the impact overall, I think it's easier to do so with sort of an organizational chart to get a feel.
So I have a new one.
Like a social,
Yes.
like where the coaches fall, where does
Yep.
the facilities director? You, obviously you guys, but the business office, because going back some years to the Allen days, I think the sitting committee, as I came on to finish someone's term, all of a sudden we realized that, the business office maybe had way more people than it needed or could be condensed to do, that kind of stuff. But I think when you don't have that chart, it's hard to catch that stuff.
So we have a new org chart.
Okay.
I have a draft, actually, and was going to mention it to Jane on Monday to put on the March 10th agenda.
Okay.
So we are oddly on the same page with that, Tammy.
Okay.
And it was for the exact reason that you shared in terms of making sure that the committee and the community has a really good snapshot, although ours looks a little bit different. The school committee and the superintendent are on the bottom of our org chart. The students are at the top. So you'll see it branch up because all of us are in place to support them.
Sure.
So it will look very different than probably other org charts you've seen where the committee and the superintendent sit on the top, or actually on the
Perfect.
bottom.
Thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate that. With this, the social worker Amanda mentioned is the social worker that we put in that was sort of the
We have
full
the
year
district, the
person.
district-wide
Yes, the 12
12-month social worker.
So that person is just here and
Yeah.
no
indispensable.
Is not on this sheet?
Nope.
Not
Okay,
on that sheet.
thank
She's
you.
got she has her check-in list ready for February break, and we'll be meeting with families and students during vacation to make sure that our most at-risk students have what they need and are,
And she has started a prom dress donation thing to
Yes.
help
Yeah.
young ladies get prom dresses who can't normally get them. So if you have extra
I didn't
prom
see that.
dresses
Yeah, I
and
didn't see
one
that either.
sitting in your closet,
Yeah.
you can donate them to our social worker.
let us know. Correct. Matt?
So we'll move from one fiscal year back to this fiscal year. And the first sheet in my reports this evening is, and I will keep these nice and simple because I will report out that they're pretty positive. So if you look at the revenue review as of February 4th, we have collected, if you look at the percentage column, which is a couple away from the right side, and you go right down to the bottom, all of our revenues have been coming in as expected, and we're at about a 52% collection of our revenues, which is just right for being at this point in the year. The only thing worth noting is you can see that big dark number that jumps out, the 41,517. In the revenue report, when it jumps out like that, that means it was unanticipated revenue. So that's additional funds that we have been seeing that we weren't expecting. So our charter.
138%, can't
That-
beat that.
Yep, so what that is because of is the fact that the SOA, the Student Opportunity Act, was not implemented as it was supposed to have been for this year. So we ended up getting a greater reimbursement from our charter school.
Great.
Awesome.
Yeah. Are there any questions on the revenue?
Anyone? Karen, Tara, nope, okay, nope.
If you move to the general fund expenditure review, you can see there are a few small red numbers, but again, they are significantly outweighed by the black numbers that we're seeing. If you turn to the back side of that sheet, you'll see right now where the summary of totals, the only one spot that we are running in the red is in benefits, which we're very slightly overspent, and that's just because of the number of new staff that we brought in that elected was beyond what it was that was originally anticipated, but we're perfectly fine.
So we're able to find the money to cover that.
We are, absolutely. All of the other numbers are, as of right now, they're a current available balance, which we will speak to one of them specifically very shortly.
And Matt, it's just over $17,000, right?
Yep.
The number in. red.
Yes. And that's out of a $3,819,000 estimated budget. We are off by 17,000, which is
Pretty darn good.
Pretty close.
pretty good. If you,
Can you speak to the guidance number? Is that what's coming up, or?
the guy,
Yeah,
We've mentioned-
2710.
Guidance.
yep, that was there were additional, because that was, the social worker position was added after this was budgeted.
Oh, okay, speaking of that.
So that was a conscious decision that we
Where we
made.
put
Yeah, we
that
assigned it
We
there.
assigned it, yeah, we assigned it there.
Again, I think, Tim, to the point you were making at one of the last meetings, making sure that the lines are all accurately, people are charged to the right place and the items are charged to the right line, exactly to your point with that. But then, Matt, how you look at that, if you're looking at the 27, what is it, the 2000s?
Yes,
That's part of the 2000s line in the back, under instructional?
yep.
So we're still
Well in-
fine there?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
still well in the black.
Is the 1110 line balanced out better than it has been in the last couple of, that was a large red number, and now it's not.
Yes.
So there was some adjustment somewhere.
Well, one of the big pieces, I think, was negotiations. We're doing that We're doing that ourselves.
Oh, okay.
Amanda and Carrie and Jane, yeah. I think that's helped.
I'm BBing.
Yeah.
Well, if you recall, the last time I did go back in and redistribute some of where the charges were, not across any major function series, but just
Sure.
across individual lines.
Oh, I see. I thought you were talking about prior fiscal years, Tammy, sorry.
No, this
'Cause we may
report,
negotiate.
that line item was
Understood.
read.
Understood.
You know, I
We're no
don't,
longer buying a sailboat.
I was thinking of the prior fiscal. Yeah, how many times did we hear that?
We're still in the black.
Yeah.
We are very much, we're in the black.
Yeah.
Our grant fund expenditure review, which is on the next sheet, again, all of our grants, I can tell you, this is worth looking at to know that the revenues are coming in and that they're being spent, but our grants are so closely monitored and we spend every cent that we get, and we are not able to spend a cent more. So you might see something in the red there, but in the end, like for example, the Title I fund, and I believe I've mentioned this in the past, it shows $40,016 in the red. However, that's what we are off of what we originally budgeted. We actually will be receiving, if you look to the right, the true dollar amount. We budgeted for $170,000, but we found out we'll be receiving $211,000.
So that'll absorb.
So that will absorb that red,
Yep.
that is
40.
where we budgeted. Because once we budget, we can't change the budget, but we can identify the fact that we received more grant funds and we're going to spend every penny that we get.
We have not turned back a dime,
No.
not a dime.
But again, things are going well with the
Yep.
grants as well, and there are no concerns. Are there any other questions on the expenditure reviews? Sure. Yep. With that discussion, as I mentioned, we were going to circle back to one of those larger black numbers. The one that I'm referring to is that function code 2305, which is our general education classroom teachers. So in your packet, you also have a proposed motion to move the two STEM teachers that are currently being funded from the ESSER 3 grant back into the general fund with function 2305. You can see that we're anticipating being in the black over $200,000 by the end of the year. And the cost of moving these two positions, especially given that it's already more than halfway through the year, would be probably less than $50,000 to $60,000. So by moving them back to the general fund, we will free up some of the ESSER
To roll it
funding
over.
that we can roll forward for future use.
That helps the bottom line here
That helps.
get to where it needs to be.
Correct.
Well, and to be clear, these positions were not part of the recovery. They were part of the regional agreement to have equity in class.
But they were originally cut.
Right,
And then when we
right.
received the ESSER funds, we introduced them back.
Right.
Because we've been advocating for them continuously.
Yeah.
So they were reintroduced through the ESSER grant.
Yeah.
However, now we're seeing that we have enough remaining funds in the general fund
To
that
put
we can
them
support
in
them.
there.
It gives us more latitude to roll those grant dollars over.
Because what happens, as you can see, if we leave the funds in the general fund, they roll down to the bottom line, they get incorporated into E&D, and we still haven't had
We wait.
E&D
We
certified
wait for them.
yet. And then we just wait for those funds to be certified, and then there's a whole other process in order to use them. So by shifting these, it makes those funds available for the beginning of the year.
So there is a proposal on the floor, and I'll entertain that as a motion if somebody would like to make it.
I'll move.
Kim, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved that the district redistribute the remaining salary expenses of the two STEM teachers to the general fund, thus enabling ESSER 3 funds to be reallocated and distributed in a later fiscal year. Is there any discussion?
Matt did a good job describing it
There
prior.
you go. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, I will make a comment that because we no longer have Monique come to our meetings, she has to listen to them in the recording that Jesse does a wonderful job of doing. But if you all don't vote, she can't record your vote. So unless we want to start going to roll call votes, people need to speak up when we call for a vote. Even if it's not something you're really happy about supporting, you still have to answer. Just an FYI, because she has to pick it up on the microphone. So please, when we take a vote, go for the gusto. Matt, still you, I think.
I will just say, thank you for making that motion. That's not going to drop the bottom line of the 23 any further. I had already incorporated those potential savings into getting to the line that we got to.
Right.
And speaking of Monique, she was very kind enough to put in the personnel report for you to view. And it is in your package.
Place it on file.
Place it on file.
I'm getting a lot of gentlemen.
Next, we have our facilities reports. And I will begin with just our facilities and projects update. As of right now, our baseball and softball dugout roofs, they're going to be installed this coming spring. The fields will be tilled and groomed in the spring. That is the plan still. We have discussed that in the event that there are problems or any kinds of issues, we have the potential to relocate the teams as we did, which we do not want to do. But it depending on the season and what happens with the landscaping, it will be important to allow the field to grow a little bit and to germinate first. So we will be monitoring that closely and hopefully playing on our fields this year. The tennis courts, the work has started. We thought they were going to be completed. There is still one more coat to finish. The weather dropped, the temperature dropped quickly, and they need some conditions. Apparently, they didn't know that yesterday and today were going to be about 50 degrees. They would have been here. But they need the temperatures to come up above 50 degrees in order to finish those repairs. A new discus and new shot put cages will be completed prior to the spring season. The footings and the sleeves have already been installed for the removable poles and netting, so really we're just waiting for the ground to clear and we'll be able to put those nice new pieces of equipment up. As many of you may know, we had a slight issue with the high school boilers, warranting putting it on our update. So actually, the boiler shutdown was not an issue with the boilers themselves. There was an issue with the gas line coming into the building from Liberty Gas, and it was a regulator valve. There was a problem with some of the springs that are part of the composition, and they fixed it so that it will run properly. However, they are still they're waiting to get the actual appropriate pieces to come back and fix it permanently. And lastly, this is really just more of a warranty issue from our workmanship. We did have a circulator pump that needed to be rebuilt at Hartnett at this school, and Riverdale Plumbing, who we use, had rebuilt it, but there were problems with it. So they are waiting for some pieces to arrive, and then they will rebuild it again, and it will not be at any additional cost, obviously, since we paid them to.
I do have a question on that. Is that for the heating system, or is that for the hot water system for the bathrooms, for the restrooms?
I believe it is for the heating system. I can get confirmation on that, though.
So
We do have a backup. There's another pump, so there's nothing that has stopped working because of this issue.
that's
We have
where I was
backup
going. We
pumps.
can't have a school without heat when it's
Correct.
20 degrees outside.
Yeah. Well, we have not had, this is the building that the pump is in, so the students here have not experienced any loss of heat. We've been lucky enough. And again, as I said, we do have backup pumps, so this is just one of the pumps.
Thank you.
And underneath our capital needs update, We briefly touched on this earlier, that we have a couple of meetings that are scheduled with our towns. Right now, we have the Millville Capital Outlay Committee scheduled for March 1st. And I know we're waiting to get a date on the books for our Blackstone Capital Outlay Committee. I know they're working on it, and we'll have something shortly. And we, at those meetings, will be discussing the long-range capital planning document that we reviewed at a workshop briefly last week. And from there, we're going to have the discussion with our joint meeting on March 2nd. You know, we're as Jane had referenced a couple of times, and we have spoke about already, there's nothing in next year's budget other than the asbestos work that we need to do that comes off of that long-range capital document. And that's intentional. It's because we want to sit down with the towns and lay out what's possible with that. But we also know that we have our budget hearing and certification on, I believe it's March 10th. Or the hearings on any of March 10th.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, we understand that we are coming down closer to that deadline, but we'll, you know, eager to work with the community and our boards to see what's possible with that process. So just a quick update on that. And that concludes our facilities report.
Thank you.
School committee forum, does anyone have any issues to bring forward? Okay, then hearing none, our next meeting is the joint meeting on March 2nd. We will not have Sarah with us, so Sarah, thank you very much for your time and your effort and the energy that you put in and the care that you gave for the time that you served this district. It will not soon be forgotten.
Thank you. It was a pleasure working with all of you. It's a good group.
You'll be
And
back.
like, I had this whole thing written out, but I hate doing that. But just the level of respect, civility, and integrity in this committee over the course of the years. Like, I don't think it can be beat. I mean, we can disagree passionately and still show each other respect. And I think that I would like to see more of that. And I will miss that. And I feel like I learned how to do that more as an individual from being around people like you. So a great deal of respect.
Clearly you didn't learn it from me.
I have so much respect for all of you, for the leadership in the district. Jane, I don't know how you do this job as chair. And thank you for your leadership as well. And I wish all of you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Sure, we'll see you at town meeting.
I'm going to get up and talk.
I hope so.
Get up there and yell about stuff.
I hope so. I'll be sitting right next to you, bringing my licorice. And what was your
You
thing, Tammy?
can't sit-
Circus peanuts.
You can't sit next to her.
Well, she can sit up in the
That's right,
no
she
fly
could.
zone. Anyone else? Aaron? Tara? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Yes.
Meeting adjourned.
That's it.